Good afternoon. This is Renee Hennick, and I'm the lead Agape director with the Adoptive and Foster Family Coalition of New York. We provide post-adoption support and post-guardianship support in 8 counties in central New York, and I'm glad to be here this morning. Also know that I am a person of lived experience. I was a foster parent many years ago. I am currently an adopted parent, and I am also a kinship parent, and have been parenting children from trauma and toxic stress histories for the last 25 years. And today I've been asked to speak to you about de-escalation and how to help our children calm after they have been triggered and are experiencing a great deal of stress. So what I would like to do first is really talk about what happens to our kids when they are triggered, when they are stressed, when they start to escalate, when they start to throw things, scream at us, throw things at us, run around, destroy property, whatever their particular situation is, what happens to their mind and their body when they're escalated. So the first thing that happens when a child is triggered or becomes escalated is their body releases a great deal of adrenaline and a stress hormone called cortisol. And those two chemicals then change the body's response. And some of the things that happen to the child's body is they have an increased heart rate, increased breathing rate, they have an increased production of glucose, and all of that oxygen and energy goes to that child's muscles so that they're ready to fight or flight, right? Run away. So that's what's happening chemically for them. What's happening in their brain is the middle of their brain, the midbrain, some people call it the downstairs brain, reacts. And its job is to monitor threats and then respond to threats to make sure the child is safe. So the middle of the brain takes over and starts into a fight, flight, or freeze response. And when the middle of the brain does that, or the downstairs brain does that, the upstairs brain, or the cortex, or particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain right behind your forehead, shuts down. And some of us say it flips up. It flips up and it's offline. It no longer works. And the upstairs brain is responsible for things like executive functions, reasoning, decision-making, emotional regulation, impulse control, communication abilities, ability to listen, ability to speak. So those things are shut down. So that's what's happening to the child when they are escalated. So how would you, as a parent, help that child's mind and body calm back down and, bring that lid back up online so that they can have good judgment, so they can regulate themselves? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what some of those techniques are. So probably the most important part of de-escalating a child is that you as the adult are regulated yourself. If you are not regulated, if you are not calm, if you are not grounded, you cannot regulate a child, right? And there's 3 reasons for that. One is if your upstairs brain is flipped up, right, and your downstairs brain or that fight, flight, freeze brain is working, you don't have the capacity to help a child calm down because you're not calm. The second thing is all of us have something called mirror neurons. That means that our brains are designed to mirror somebody else's, right? So if you yawn, I yawn, right? So for a child, if you as the parent are escalated and your body and mind aren't grounded, the child will mirror that, right? The child will also become unregulated. And the third thing is something called entrainment. Our bodies and minds are built to sync up with each other, right? We all want to be as one. So if you are escalated, that child is going to sync up to your escalation. If you are calm, that child will then be able to calm. So vital to any de-escalation is that you are grounded and regulated yourself first. And if you need to take a few minutes to get yourself regulated, walk away, regulate yourself, and then come back and engage the child. Because you are regulated, you then will co-regulate the child, right? When a child is escalated, they are unable to regulate their bodies, their minds, their emotions, because that downstairs brain has taken over and the upstairs thinking brain has turned itself off. So they need you as the adult to co-regulate them. So co-regulation is key. You will become that child's regulator. Another thing to know about kids who have escalated and really are at this point out of control is that their bodies and their minds are flooded by these chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline. Their downstairs brain is taken over, their upstairs brain is flipped off. Is that it takes time for that child's brain to calm down. And what we see in a lot of our kids, it can take anywhere from a few minutes all the way up to 90 minutes for them to calm down. So as you're co-regulating your child, the expectation needs to be that it's going to take some time. It's not going to be, I'm going to co-regulate and in a minute that child's going to be calm, because their body doesn't work that way. It takes time for those chemicals to dissipate. It takes time for the midbrain to calm down, and it takes time for that prefrontal cortex or the thinking brain to re-engage. So give yourself some time, give that child some time. So what are some of the specific techniques that research has proven to help a child de-escalate? And the very first one is counterintuitive to what we have been taught for the last 30 years about parenting, right? We have been taught, and teachers have been taught, when a child is escalating, they need to go sit down, calm down, right? They need to go sit in the thinking chair, they need to take a break, they need to, right? But in reality, think about what's happening to your child's mind and body, right? Their adrenaline is pumping, cortisol is pumping, they've got all this extra oxygen and glucose rushing through their body into their muscles, and we tell them to sit. And their bodies physically can't do that. Their bodies need to move. You need to move to dissipate those chemicals, dissipate that energy. So physical activity is key. Rather than sit down and calm down, it's, hey, let's go take a walk. Let's go take a run. Let's march around the room. Let's skip around the room. Let's get our wiggles out. Let's move our body, because as you move your body, those chemicals will dissipate, and that energy that's been built up will be able to dissipate. So move rather than sit. Here's some other techniques that have been proven, and you have to find what works for your child. Every child is different, and it works differently for every kiddo. But one thing that works universally, which I think is fascinating, is chewing. Chewing actually decreases those chemicals, decreases the body's response, and increases the engagement of the prefrontal cortex. Whether it's chewing a piece of gum, one of my children love fruit snacks, whether it's a carrot, whatever it is, allow that chewing action to help that child calm down. Other things that have been proven is music. Music is powerful. Whether the child's listening to music or making music, it really does engage that thinking brain and calm the body down. So music is a great way to calm a child. The same with videos. I know most parents say, I don't want my child on screen time, they have too much screen time already. I'm not advocating for a significant amount of screen time, but what I will say to you is that short videos will engage that child's prefrontal cortex. It will allow that child to calm down. It actually kind of flips them from, oh, I'm upset, to, oh, wait, this is an interesting video. So even a couple of minutes of a silly cat video will re-engage that child and calm that child down. Another technique that's becoming popular right now is something called tapping, where the child's tapping on the table, tapping their shoulder, tapping their hands. Tapping actually has been proven to work. Other things that are extremely popular, particularly in the last couple of years, are fidget toys. Things where kids are manipulating items with their hands. Anytime you engage a child's hands, it will then engage the child's thinking brain and allow that child to calm down. Another thing that you see quite often are those weighted blankets, weighted vests, compression vests. For some kids, they work amazingly well and really do help our kids. For some kids, it actually escalates them. So you have to decide which of those two kids do you have. Is it going to help your child with the weighted items, or is it actually going to do the reverse? For some of the kids where the weighted items don't work, I actually find for some of those kids, if you engage their large muscles with weight, it helps. So for example, we had a little kindergartner who the weighted items actually escalated her, but when we had a basket of library books that she had to lift and carried to the library, which included walking, it de-escalated her. The other thing that universally we know is anything that is rhythmic engages the thinking brain and allows the rest of the brain to calm down. So whether it's rhythmic speech, music, drumming, skipping, hopping, whatever is that rhythm for your kiddo. Other things that we know really work well, which is actually counterintuitive, is humor. I know in the moment that your child is escalated, it's not funny to you as the parent. But if you make it funny or humorous or silly or absurd, it will turn the child around quite often. It's probably one of the hardest things to do because you as an adult are having a hard time finding humor in what's going on. The other thing that we know works is mindful breathing, allowing that child to take some deep breaths and calm down. I would say you have to gauge where your child is at. They have to be ready to be able to do that. Because if they're not ready and they start engaging in those breathing activities, it actually can escalate it because they're breathing at a too fast of rate, which actually can increase anxiety. So be cognizant of when your child is ready to engage in that kind of activity. The last thing that I love to talk about is to go back to what we talked about before in terms of mirror neurons and entrainment. You have to remain calm so they'll follow you, but you also can use it to help them calm down. So what we talk about is something called behavior matching, where you remain grounded, you remain calm, but you match that child's behavior. And then once you match that child's behavior and you sync up with that child, then you start to calm your body and your mind, and the child will then follow you. So for example, I had a foster child who was a 6-year-old. And for the first few weeks of living in my home, this child had a horrific history of abuse and neglect. And he would come into my home and he would sit on the kitchen table or sit on the kitchen floor with his arms wrapped around his knees in a fetal position, and he would rock back and forth and hit his head against the kitchen cabinets. Now, 25 years ago, we didn't have answers like we have today, so I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. So I sat next to him about 2 feet away, put my arms around my knees, and I started rocking, and I started banging my head in sync with him. And once I sunk up with him, I then stopped banging my head. I slowed my rocking down, and so did he. He followed me. Right? So as I slowed my rocking down, he slowed his rocking down. As I stopped, he stopped. And it took us about a month of me doing that with him over and over and over before we actually extinguished the behavior completely. But it did allow him to calm down and re-engage with me. So those are some of the techniques that can help you de-escalate your child. Remember, connecting with your child is the key, and remaining calm and engaged, and that will help your child calm. So thank you for participating in this seminar with me. I look forward to other opportunities. Thank you.